I think back to the early days of my marriage with Lisa as if they were part of some golden, hazy dream. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and instantly draw everyone's attention, her smile infectious, her laughter bright. I believed we were the perfect couple. Love, passion, respect, it felt like we had it all, like we were living in a fairy tale. But life has a funny way of peeling back layers you never expected to see. I threw myself into my work, probably more than I should have. As a senior executive at a marketing company, my days were long, but I always told myself I was doing it for her. I thought every late night and all the sacrifices I made were for us. Lisa never once complained about the hours or the nights I left her alone. She'd always say, "It's all right, sweetheart, you're working hard for our future." And I believed her. I was so naive. The first signs of trouble came in small, almost unnoticeable ways. She was on her phone more, made excuses to go out by herself, and brushed me off when I suggested joining her. I started seeing late-night texts and overheard some hushed phone calls, but I didn't want to come off as paranoid. I had faith in her, in us. How blind I was. While I was busting my back at work, Lisa was living a double life. The warning signs were there, but love has a way of covering up what you don't want to face. It tricks you into believing the picture you've painted, not the reality staring you in the face. Every evening, she'd kiss me goodbye as I headed out for work, and every morning, she welcomed me home with that same warm smile, acting as if everything was perfectly fine. It wasn't until much later that I'd uncover the depth of her betrayal. When I look back, I ask myself why I didn't confront her sooner, why I let those doubts simmer without acting on them. But the truth is, no one wants to face the idea that the person they love could betray them so completely. That is, until it all blows up in your face. It was a Tuesday. Just a regular day, or at least it should have been. I'd forgotten my laptop at home and decided to swing by the house during my lunch break. Lisa had mentioned she was going out to lunch with a friend, so I didn't expect her to be there. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked outside. It wasn't anyone I knew, none of our friends or neighbors. I brushed it off, thinking it must have been a friend she hadn't mentioned. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy. As I walked toward the bedroom, I heard muffled voices. My heart started racing, my stomach dropping into a knot. I opened the door, and there she was. Lisa. In bed. With another man. My brain short-circuited. I just stood there, frozen in place, unable to wrap my head around what I was seeing. They didn't even notice me at first. When Lisa finally spotted me, her eyes went wide with shock. The guy scrambled out of bed, fumbling to grab his clothes. It was like I was watching it all happen from a distance, as if it wasn't really happening to me. No shouting, no screaming. I just turned around and walked out, feeling completely numb. Lisa didn't follow me. She didn't call, didn't text, nothing. I got in my car and drove off, my mind spinning with confusion and pain. The betrayal hit so fast and so deep, I didn't even know how to react. That night, I didn't confront her. Instead, I sat in my car for hours, parked in an empty lot, staring through the rain-streaked windshield, replaying what had just happened over and over in my mind. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, after all the love we'd shared, how could she throw it all away like that? But as it turned out, that was only the beginning. The next few weeks passed by in a blur. Of course, Lisa apologized. She cried, begged, said it was a mistake and that it wouldn't happen again. But something inside me had broken. The trust was gone, smashed into a million pieces. I had no idea how to even begin forgiving her, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I felt like a stranger in my own house, like the walls were closing in on me. But what happened next was something I never could have predicted. One evening, I came home to find two police officers waiting for me. Without hesitation, they arrested me on the spot, accusing me of domestic violence. I was completely stunned. Lisa had filed a complaint, claiming I had assaulted her during one of our arguments. She stood there, tears rolling down her face, acting the part of the victim flawlessly. And the cops? They bought it. That night, I found myself sitting in a cold cell, my mind spinning. How was this even real? I had never so much as laid a hand on her, never even raised my voice. But Lisa had woven such a convincing story, I was now caught in her web of lies with no way out. The next morning, I was released, only to return to an empty house. Lisa was gone, and most of our things with her. She vanished, leaving behind nothing but the bitter sting of betrayal. But she wasn't done with me yet. The following weeks turned into an absolute nightmare. Lisa filed for divorce, citing abuse as her reason. She claimed I had been controlling, manipulative, and violent throughout our marriage. The things she said in court were so outlandish that I couldn't believe anyone would take them seriously. But they did. My reputation was dragged through the mud. Friends, even family members, started pulling away, refusing to hear my side of the story. It felt like the whole system was stacked against me, and no matter what I did, I couldn't fight back. Lisa's lies painted me as some kind of monster, and no matter how hard I tried to show the truth, nobody was listening. But through all the pain, one thing kept me going, my need for revenge. I wasn't going to let Lisa get away with what she had done. She had destroyed my life, shattered everything I had worked for. But I wasn't about to let her walk away with the last laugh. I began to plot, carefully, knowing I had to bide my time and wait for the perfect moment. And when that moment came, I would make sure she paid for every single thing she'd done. The idea for the gift box came to me in one of those quiet, rage-filled moments. I had been drowning in my thoughts for months, replaying every detail of her betrayal. Lisa's affair had left me shattered, and her false accusations that landed me in jail had hollowed me out. But as I sat alone in the living room of the house we had once shared, surrounded by the remnants of a broken marriage, a plan began to form. It was simple at first. I just wanted her to know she hadn't won. Sure, she had humiliated me and turned me into a villain in everyone's eyes, but I still had one thing left, the truth. I knew things she didn't, things about her lover, Steve, that would flip her life upside down. But it wasn't enough to just let her hear whispers or rumors. No, I wanted it to hit her hard, like a sledgehammer. So, that's when the idea of the gift box was born. The plan started with research. This wasn't going to be some haphazard revenge scheme. It needed to be calculated, precise. I hired a private investigator, a guy named Dave, who came highly recommended by someone we both knew. He was thorough, discreet, and most importantly, he knew how to dig up the kind of secrets people tried to bury. I laid out the whole situation to him, and he took it from there. In just a few weeks, Dave came through with everything I needed, details of Lisa's affair, proof of her financial ties to Steve, and the most damning piece of evidence: Steve wasn't just her lover, he was a professional conman. The guy had a trail of different aliases, a list of victims in various cities, and a well-rehearsed scheme of charming women, gaining control of their finances, and then bleeding them dry. Lisa wasn't special, she was just the latest in a long line of women who had fallen for his tricks. I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction as I combed through Dave's report. Lisa thought she was pulling all the strings, that she had the upper hand in both our marriage and the divorce. But she had no idea that the man she chose over me was using her, the same way she had used me. In a way, it was poetic justice. Once I had everything laid out, I started planning how to deliver my gift. It had to be personal, something that would catch Lisa completely off guard. I chose her birthday. She'd be expecting flowers, maybe a card, or some meaningless present from a friend who still believed she deserved celebrating. But what she would receive was far from ordinary. The package itself was simple, a plain brown box, carefully wrapped, with no clue as to who sent it. I wanted her to open it out of curiosity, thinking it might be a peace offering or a gift from some admirer. Inside the box, I placed an elegant jewelry case. It was custom-made, polished wood with delicate inlays, something I knew would catch her eye right away. But the real surprise wasn't the box itself. Hidden within the velvet lining was a tiny recording device, set to start playing the second she opened the lid. And the message it played? That was all me. The recording began with my voice, calm and measured. "Hi, Lisa," it started. "I wanted to give you something special for your birthday. I know we've been through a lot, and you probably think I hate you. But I don't. In fact, I pity you." I imagined her sitting there, frozen, fingers gripping the box, her mind scrambling to figure out what was happening. She wouldn't have seen this coming. She likely thought she'd left me behind, moving on to something, or someone, better. But this wasn't just about revenge. This was about revealing the truth she was too blind to see. "I've known about the affair for a long time," my voice continued. "Long before you thought I did. And I know about Steve, too." By this point, I imagined her heart would be racing, that sinking feeling setting in. She had no idea I had been looking into her or that I knew the truth about the man she left me for. "The thing is, Lisa, Steve isn't who you think he is. He's not your knight in shining armor. He's a conman." I had timed everything perfectly, building the tension with each word. "He's been using you, Lisa. Just like he's used so many other women before you. He's drained your bank accounts, taken your money, and once he's done, he'll vanish. Just like he always does." By this point, I could picture her in full panic mode. Maybe she'd try to stop the recording, maybe she'd even try to turn it off. But that wouldn't change anything. The truth was already out there, and the message would keep playing. "I've gathered all the evidence," my voice continued. "I had every email, every bank transfer, every lie Steve had fed her. I knew it all. And now, so did she." But that wasn't the end of it. The real twist was still waiting to unfold. I hadn't forgotten how she tried to ruin my life, getting me arrested, spinning lies about what really happened between us, and thinking she'd walk away untouched. Well, actions have consequences, Lisa. And now, everyone was going to know the truth. The message wrapped up with a simple statement: "I hope you enjoy your birthday." I pictured her sitting there, staring at the now empty jewelry box, her world unraveling. She would finally realize she wasn't in control at all, that everything she thought she'd gained by betraying me had been built on lies. Steve had used her, just like she had used me, and now, she was about to lose it all. But the real beauty of the plan? It wasn't just in the message itself. It was all about the timing. By the time Lisa opened that box, Steve would already be gone. Dave had been tracking him for weeks, and we timed it perfectly. Steve had been slowly draining her accounts, planning his exit and preparing to skip town. She had no clue, of course. She thought they were building a future together. But as soon as she heard that recording, she would realize the man she sacrificed everything for was just a criminal, and she was his latest victim. And as if that wasn't enough, I had one final card to play. The recording wasn't just for Lisa, it was evidence. I made sure the audio file could be easily shared, and I sent copies to the people closest to her, her family, her friends, even her lawyer. By the time she finished listening to the message, everyone she trusted would already know the truth. Her reputation destroyed. I could almost see her sitting alone in that fancy apartment, hands shaking, trying to process it all. She'd probably try calling Steve, but he wouldn't pick up. He was long gone, phone disconnected, social media scrubbed clean. She'd have nothing left. No money, no lover, no allies. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. The day the package was delivered, I felt this odd calm settle over me. I had carried the weight of Lisa's betrayal for so long, but in that moment, it felt like a heavy load had finally been lifted. I wasn't angry anymore. The thirst for revenge had faded. I had done what I needed to do, and now, it was out of my hands. That evening, I got a text from Dave, "It's done." She opened the box. I smiled to myself, knowing the wheels had been set in motion. Lisa's carefully crafted world was about to crumble, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The next morning, I got another text, this time from an unknown number. It was Lisa. "Michael," the message began, "we need to talk." I didn't bother responding. There was nothing left to say. I had given her the gift of truth, and now it was up to her to face the consequences. The silence that followed was louder than anything she could have said. That quiet rage I had been living with for months, reliving her betrayal over and over, had finally been released. Lisa's affair had broken me, and those false accusations that landed me in jail had left me empty inside. But as I sat in the living room of the house we once shared, surrounded by the echoes of our shattered marriage, an idea had started to form. It began simply: I wanted Lisa to know she hadn't won. Sure, she had humiliated me, made me out to be the bad guy in the eyes of everyone we knew. But there was one thing she didn't have: control over the truth. I knew things she didn't, things about Steve that would turn her life upside down. I didn't want the truth to reach her as some quiet whisper or a rumor that might fizzle out behind her back. No, it had to be a dramatic, undeniable blow, something that would completely catch her off guard. That's when the idea of the gift box took shape. I knew this couldn't be a simple revenge scheme, it had to be meticulous, almost surgical in its precision. So I hired a private investigator, a guy named Dave, who came highly recommended by a mutual acquaintance. He was thorough, discreet, and most importantly, knew how to dig up secrets people tried to keep hidden. I laid everything out for him, explaining the situation, and he took it from there. In just a few weeks, Dave had gathered all the dirt I needed. He had the details of Lisa's affair, proof of her financial dealings with Steve, and the most damning piece of all: Steve wasn't just her lover, he was a seasoned con artist. He had multiple aliases, a string of victims across different cities, and a well-practiced method of charming women, gaining access to their finances, and then draining them dry. Lisa wasn't the first, just the latest in a long line of women who had fallen for his act. I couldn't help but feel a twisted satisfaction as I flipped through Dave's report. Lisa had thought she was the one calling the shots, that she had all the power in our marriage and in our divorce. But little did she know, the man she'd left me for had been playing her, just as she had played me. In a way, it felt like poetic justice. With all the information in hand, I began planning how to deliver my gift. It had to be personal, something that would completely throw her off balance. I chose her birthday, knowing she'd be expecting flowers, a card, or maybe a small gift from some well-meaning friend who still believed she deserved to be celebrated. But what she was going to get was far more unsettling. The package itself was simple, a plain brown box, carefully wrapped with no hint of who had sent it. I wanted her curiosity to get the better of her, to make her think it was some kind of peace offering or a gift from someone who admired her. Inside the box, I placed a beautifully crafted jewelry case, something that would immediately catch her eye. It was custom-made, polished wood with delicate inlays, the sort of thing I knew would intrigue her. But the real surprise wasn't the box itself. Hidden within the velvet lining of the case was a small recording device, set to play the moment she opened the lid. And the message it contained? That was all me. It started with my voice, calm and controlled. "Hi, Lisa," the message began. "I wanted to give you something special for your birthday. I know we've been through a lot, and you probably think I hate you. But the truth is, I don't. I pity you." I could picture her sitting there, frozen, her fingers gripping the box as her mind raced. She wouldn't have seen this coming. She would have thought the worst was behind her, that she had moved on to something better. But this wasn't just about revenge, it was about showing her the truth she had been too blind to see. I've known about the affair for a long time, my voice continued in the recording. Long before you thought I did. And I know about Steve. That would be the moment when her heart would start pounding in her chest. She had no idea I'd been looking into her, no clue I knew the truth about the man she had chosen over me. The thing is, Lisa, Steve isn't who you think he is. He's not your savior, and he's definitely not the man you believe him to be. He's a con artist. I had timed the message perfectly, building the tension with every word. He's been using you, Lisa. Just like he's used dozens of women before you. He's drained your accounts, stolen your money, and when he's done with you, he'll disappear. Just like he always does. By that point in the recording, I could only imagine Lisa was in full panic mode. She probably tried to pause it or even stop it altogether, but the message would just keep on playing, hammering the truth home. I've gathered all the evidence, my voice continued. Every email, every bank transfer, every lie he's told you. I know everything. And now, so do you. But that wasn't the grand finale. The real twist was still to come. I know you tried to ruin my life, I went on. You got me arrested, lied to everyone about what happened between us, and thought you could just walk away without any consequences. But actions have consequences, Lisa. And now, everyone is going to know the truth. The message wrapped up with one final line, I hope you enjoy your birthday. I pictured her sitting there, staring at the now empty jewelry box, her whole world crumbling around her. It would finally hit her that she wasn't in control at all, that everything she thought she'd gained by betraying me had been a lie. Steve had used her, just like she had used me, and now she was about to lose everything. But the brilliance of the plan wasn't just in the message, it was in the timing. By the time Lisa opened that box, Steve would already be long gone. Dave had been tracking his every move, and we had timed it perfectly. Steve had been draining Lisa's accounts for weeks, preparing to disappear. She had no idea. She thought he loved her, that they were building some kind of future together. But the moment she heard that recording, she would finally realize the truth. The man she'd thrown everything away for was nothing more than a con artist, and she was his latest victim. And if that wasn't enough, I had one more trick up my sleeve. The recording wasn't just a private message for Lisa, it was evidence. I made sure the audio file could be easily shared, and I sent copies to several key people in her life, her family, her closest friends, even her lawyer. By the time she finished listening to the message, those she trusted most would already know the truth. Her reputation? Completely destroyed. I could picture her sitting there, alone in her fancy apartment, hands trembling as she tried to process it all. She'd probably try calling Steve, but of course, he wouldn't answer. He was already gone, his phone disconnected, social media wiped clean. She'd be left with nothing. No money, no lover, no support. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. The day the package was delivered, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I'd carried the weight of Lisa's betrayal for so long, but now it felt like that burden had finally been lifted. I wasn't angry anymore. The need for revenge had faded. I had done what I needed to do, and now, it was out of my hands. That evening, I got a text from Dave. It's done, the message read. She opened the box. I smiled to myself, knowing the wheels were already in motion. Lisa's carefully constructed little world was about to collapse, and there wasn't a thing she could do to stop it. The next morning, I got another text, this time from an unknown number. It was Lisa. Michael, the message began, we need to talk. I didn't bother replying. There was nothing left to say. I had given her the gift of truth, and now she'd have to face the consequences. The silence that followed was louder than any words. In the weeks that passed, Lisa's life began to spiral out of control. I expected her to fight, to try and hold on to what little she had left, but it became clear pretty quickly that she was in way over her head. Steve hadn't just drained her accounts, He'd left her buried under a mountain of debt. Loans she had taken out in her name, believing they were for their future, were now hanging over her, and she hadn't seen it coming at all. Dave, the private investigator, kept me updated, sending regular reports and photos of Lisa's every move. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. She had to sell her car and most of her possessions just to keep up with the mounting legal fees. The apartment she had moved into after leaving me had been repossessed, and now she was living in a rundown studio in one of the roughest parts of town. But her troubles didn't end there. The police had begun investigating her finances, and it wasn't long before they uncovered the full extent of Steve's fraud. They tracked the money through a series of shell companies, all set up under Lisa's name. On paper, it looked like she was involved in the scam, even though she had no clue what was really happening. Soon, the media picked up on the story. Headlines like "Local Woman Linked to Con Artist's Fraud Scheme" and "Victim or Accomplice" started popping up everywhere. Her reputation was in tatters. Friends who had stood by her during our divorce quickly distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. I watched from the sidelines, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. This was the same woman who had tried to tear me down, who had lied and manipulated without a second thought. And now, she was reaping what she had sown. Even with her life falling apart, Lisa never stopped trying to reach out to me. There were more calls, more desperate texts. I ignored every single one. I had moved on, or at least I was trying to. My life was heading in a different direction. I had started going to therapy, working through the pain, the betrayal, trying to rebuild myself from the wreckage of our marriage. It was slow, but I was making progress. Still, there was one last thing hanging over me, the final piece of the puzzle. I wasn't quite done yet. It was a cold, rainy afternoon when I saw her again. I hadn't planned on running into Lisa, but sometimes life throws things at you when you least expect it. I was at the grocery store, going about the mundane task of stocking up, trying to establish a normal routine again, one that didn't revolve around the chaos of my failed marriage. But as I pushed my cart through the parking lot, I spotted her. She was standing by the entrance, huddled under a small umbrella that barely kept her dry in the pouring rain. Her once stylish clothes were now wrinkled and worn, and her hair, which used to be so perfectly done, hung limp around her face. She looked nothing like the woman I used to know. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I saw a flicker of recognition. For a second, I thought about turning around, walking the other way like I hadn't seen her. But something kept me rooted in place. She started walking toward me, slow and uncertain, as if she wasn't sure what to say after everything that had happened. "Michael," she said softly when she finally reached me. Her voice was quiet, almost as if she was afraid of what I might say. I didn't respond right away, just looked at her, waiting. I could see the toll of the last few months written all over her face. She looked exhausted, broken, like someone who had lost everything. I just wanted to apologize," she finally said, her voice shaking. "For everything. I know it's too late, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I'm sorry." As I listened to her words, a strange mix of emotions swirled inside me. Part of me wanted to accept her apology, to let it all go and move on. But another part of me, the part that still carried the hurt and anger, couldn't forget what she had done. "I've already forgiven you, Lisa," I said, my voice steady but firm. "But that doesn't mean I'll ever forget." She nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. She looked so small and defeated, standing there in the rain, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you like this." I sighed, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. It had been months since the day I discovered her betrayal, and in that time, I had cycled through every emotion possible: anger, sadness, regret. But now, standing in front of her, I realized that I didn't feel anything anymore. I was numb. "Lisa," I said quietly, you made your choices. Now you have to live with them. She nodded again, a single tear rolling down her cheek. Without another word, she turned and walked away, fading into the rain. And just like that, she was gone. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking less and less about Lisa. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, all of it started to fade into the background as I focused on rebuilding my life. I had been so consumed by what she'd done, by the need for revenge, that I had forgotten what it felt like to live without that weight on my shoulders. The therapy sessions were helping. I was learning to let go of the past, to stop letting Lisa's actions define who I was. I had gone through hell and back, but I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my life again. The gift box I sent her had been a turning point, not just for her, but for me too. It was my way of taking control, of reclaiming the power she had stolen from me. But looking back on everything, I realized the real gift wasn't in the revenge. It was in the freedom. I was free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, and the toxic cycle we'd been stuck in for so long. Free to start over, to rebuild my life on my terms. That, I understood, was the greatest gift of all. I had spent so long chasing revenge, but in the end, it wasn't about getting even. It was about letting go. As the weeks turned into months, I started to focus on the things that truly mattered, my career, my friendships, my own happiness. I began traveling more, exploring new places, and experiencing new things. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since before Lisa and I met. It was like rediscovering a part of myself that I had lost along the way. And with each passing day, I felt more like myself again. There were still moments when Lisa crossed my mind. I'd wonder where she was, if she had managed to piece her life back together. But those moments were fleeting, and they no longer had the hold over me that they once did. One evening, as I sat on the porch of my new home, watching the sun sink below the horizon, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Lisa. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. The letter was brief, just a few lines in her familiar handwriting. Michael, I wanted to thank you. Not for what you did, but for what it taught me. I've lost everything, but in losing it all, I've learned something about myself. I'm not the person I thought I was, and for that, I'm sorry. I hope you found peace. Lisa. I stared at the letter for a long time, letting the words sink in. I wasn't sure how to feel, but in the end, I realized it didn't matter. I had already moved on. I folded the letter and set it aside, turning my attention back to the sunset. The sky was ablaze with shades of orange and pink, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. It was beautiful. And as I sat there, watching the day fade into night, I knew my story wasn't over, it was just beginning.